Sometimes it takes a few mere months for teams and fans of the NHL to understand who actually won specific trades. Sometimes these trades that happen at the trade deadline are paid off in full via dividends a little bit down the line when the team that made the trade ends up winning the cup or something, or the first overall pick. Weird stuff like that, right? But in this video, we're going over a trade that was made that makes the Edmonton Oilers kinda come out on the wrong side here. And a lot of this is unfortunate, it's unlucky, it wasn't really expected to go down this way. The Edmonton Oilers were apparently just taking a mild risk with this kind of trade. But now, after the circumstances have arisen where the playoffs happened in the bubble and we stopped playing hockey for a few months, they really have not looked good, especially heading into the new situation that we have on our hands. So today we're talking about the Andreas Athanasiou trade once again, and the brand new story that has developed around Athanasiou and his overall RFA situation with the Oilers. So if you take a look at what exactly we had on our hands here, Andreas Athanasiou was traded at the trade deadline from the Detroit Red Wings alongside of Ryan Kuffner to the Edmonton Oilers in exchange for Sam Gagner and 2 second-round draft picks. Now, a lot of people, myself included, at the very beginning, once this trade was made, were saying things like, okay, I don't really care how good Athanasiou becomes. At the end of the day, this is a situation where the Edmonton Oilers took on a big risk of a guy who was a year removed from getting 30 goals, but who has a whole bunch of question marks to his game. He is one of the fastest players in the league, but aside from that, there isn't really much else that he brings. He got 30 goals based off of his speed and pretty much that alone. And Red Wings fans were saying, okay, with his contract expiring a little bit later, with the whole situation of the Red Wings being a bad team that needs to get better in the long term, maybe it would be best to take a look at Athanasiou, a guy who is indeed 26 years old already, and ship him out for some younger assets like second-round picks in the 2020 and 2021 NHL Entry Draft. So that's kind of what everybody was saying. Okay, you get rid of Athanasiou, great, you get young assets back in return, awesome. And for the Edmonton Oilers, there was a little bit of a risk involved, but Andreas Athanasiou on paper was a guy who looked like he could develop into a very specific type of player for the Edmonton Oilers. A fast guy playing alongside of Connor McDavid seemed like the best pairing you could think of. And for the most part, they did try it out, but it didn't really work. Athanasiou had 9 games played in the regular season with the Oilers. He had 1 goal, 1 assist for 2 points, and in the postseason he played 4 games and he didn't end up scoring anything. So, not great. But now, this is where the problem arises, because Athanasiou is an RFA, and he's due for a $3 million qualifying offer a little bit after the entry draft. And this is just something that apparently the Edmonton Oilers really don't want to pay. Let's go over onto a few articles talking about the brand new situation here. So, on TSN's most recent trade bait list, updated 2 days ago by Frank Saravalli, Andreas Athanasiou is the 3rd asset on this list. Let's take a look at the actual write-up for Athanasiou here on the trade bait list. The Oilers are seeking to move Athanasiou before he is due a $3 million qualifying offer by October 7th, a price that Edmonton cannot afford to pay. Athanasiou is always intriguing because of both his speed and his 30-goal season, but he certainly didn't produce for the Oilers in a limited 13-game showing, including a qualifying series loss. Oilers GM Ken Holland is between a rock and a hard place on this one. Holland gave up 2 second-round picks for Athanasiou at the deadline. Now teams are thinking he'll let Athanasiou walk for nothing in the absence of a qualifying offer, limiting the return on a trade for his rights. So pretty much, Athanasiou is in a position where the Oilers can't really afford to pay him that qualifying offer that he is due. But that $3 million mark is the minimum of what he's actually allowed to being paid. So now the Oilers are in a position where they need to trade this guy, because they can't afford it. But there would only be a handful of other teams in the NHL that actually would be able to afford that $3 million qualifying offer, and that fact in general limits who the Oilers are able to trade Athanasiou with, which makes this whole idea so much more of a mess than what we expected this to be. let's go over onto Spectre's Hockey, the most recent article published on September 19th, where they talk about Andreas Athanasiou. The writer here, Lyle Richardson, cites the same trade bait article, and he goes over some of the ideas listed on it: Phil Kessel, Tyler Bozak, Andreas Athanasiou, of course, because he is the one that we're talking about here today. This is what is written about Athanasiou. Sarah Bailey reports the Oilers are trying to trade Athanasiou before he's due a $3 million qualifying offer on October 7th. However, teams think GM Ken Holland could let him walk, which would hurt his trade value. Here's another point that is brought up here on the article. The Edmonton Journal's David Staples believes Holland is in a bind, given he parted with 2 second-round draft picks to acquire Athanasiou. He is not worth $3 million, and Staples thinks Holland believes he can find a better winger than Athanasiou at a lower price. If so, he might have to let him walk and try to replace those 2 draft picks via the trade market. So that's kind of why I said at the beginning of this video that the Athanasiou trade, with hindsight included, was kind of a failure. For a little bit more of an analysis here, let's go over to ProHockeyRumors.com, where they talk about the same idea. They wrote about, firstly, how it actually is possible to sign for a lower amount of money than the qualifying offer signifies, but it's very unlikely. Especially because he is a year away from UFA eligibility, meaning that he probably would want a short-term deal so he can get that big UFA check a little bit later. Then they talk about how exactly the trade route looks like, how teams are going to need to be able to sign him and pay him at least $3 million, but it's really not a number that it looks like he actually is worth. So the last little bit kind of sums up the entire situation here. It's basically a no-win situation for Edmonton when it comes to Athanasiou's future with the team, which is why it appears that future is unlikely to last longer than the next 2.5 weeks. So, probably sometime from now until October 7th, when that qualifying offer is due, we will see something happen with Athanasiou. And I think what happens indeed is going to be very interesting, because Ken Holland did indeed see this guy with Detroit. He watched him develop for so long. He made a trade for him, tried to put him alongside of Connor McDavid, and it didn't work. Straight up, it just didn't work. So now Red Wings fans are taking a look at this like, yeah, sorry man, that sucks. And it sucks even more because if the cap actually raised up in the way that people thought it would, this whole problem probably could have been avoided. Because of the pandemic where everything had to shut down, and because of this flat cap, that $3 million price tag all of a sudden is a lot more undesired than it appeared to have been back then when the actual trade was made in the first place. So this was ultimately just the worst case scenario here for Edmonton. You make a trade, you take a risk, sure, you might be able to pay it off a little bit in the future because the cap is going to rise and it'll be fine once the money is all settled in. But no, it doesn't work out on the ice. Connor McDavid doesn't have any chemistry with Athanasiou. The guy doesn't get any points, the guy doesn't score any goals, and now you're in a position where you gotta trade this guy away, let him walk or what, and you're basically out 2 draft picks on it. And those are 2 seconds too. That's not a cheap amount of draft picks either. So I guess for us Red Wings fans over here, sure, I guess it's appropriate to take a look and laugh in this situation, but man, I kind of feel bad for the Oilers. 2 second-round picks can be very valuable, especially considering how the NHL drafts are trending towards these days, where anybody seems like they have potential. So I think it's a very unfortunate situation, and it's the ultimate failure over here. Everything combined into what was a very bad situation that we didn't really see once the trade was made, because I'll admit, once the trade was made, I was one of those guys saying, yeah, this could be really good. McDavid, Athanasiou, speed plus speed, Lightning McQueen over here, 1 winner, 42 losers, awesome. It just really didn't work out from the financial point of view, the cap not rising, from the on-ice point of view, and now this guy's an RFA with a $3 million qualifying offer because he had 30 goals a year ago on a bad Red Wings team, and the Oilers are just kind of done out of luck. So, whatever happens with Athanasiou, we'll update the story as it goes on, but for now, the trade at the beginning, the very first one that was made, man, absolute failure in hindsight. So, talk to me in the comments what you think about this whole idea. Am I being too harsh? I don't know if I am. I think I could be, but I think I have a point too. So, let me know in the comments what you think about this whole idea. Hope you enjoyed this video. So, that's Trollus99, and bye.